In this presentation, I'm going to cover the rectangular array command. So the array command is one command, but there's two options, the rectangular option and the polar option. This demonstration will deal with the rectangular option, which will copy things in rows and columns. In this case, I've got a small object on my screen, a square that I drew with lines, and a small circle inside of it. Now I'll use the array command. When I go to array, you'll notice that the array command is the only command that has a dialog box associated with it. Up at the top, you have rectangular array or polar array. Notice there's two totally different types of settings that you'd have to do depending on which option you select. So I'm going to go back to the rectangular option. One of the first things I recommend doing is selecting your objects, but it really does not matter which order you complete things in on this dialog box. So I will select objects. I'll use the window and I'll hit enter once I'm done selecting objects, just like any other command, and it should come back to my dialog box. Then you tell it how many number of rows do you have. And again, you can look over here. Rows are indicated by horizontal lines. Rows are always horizontal. Columns are vertical, just like in a building structure. So let's say that I want to have 10 rows, and number of columns, I want 8 columns. Then under the offset distance and direction, the row offset and the column offset are two different items that you could either type in or you can pick from the screen. I know that my object is 2 units long, so I'm going to leave it set by one, and I'm going to go over to preview. I know it won't work correctly, but I just want to show you something. When I preview, notice that it kind of jumbled things together, and that is based on this corner over here at the far corner. That is the origin of my object. So when it went 1 unit, it went 1 unit to this point. Okay? Well, my object is from there, the origin, 2 units over to there. If I want it to be 1 unit away from my object, I'm going to say modify. So anytime you preview it, you just go back to modify. You get your dialog box again. Instead of having an offset of 1, I know my shape was 2 by 2, so I'm going to make it 3 and 3. So this here will give me, when I preview it, 1 unit between my objects from there to there. So it's an overall of 3 from the origin to this point and from the origin to that point. I'm going to either go back to modify or I can accept it at this point. I'll choose just to accept. Now the objects have gone off my screen, so I'm going to type in Z enter, A enter to do a zoom all. If you want to count them up, I've got 10 rows top to bottom and I've got 8 columns from left to right. The original entity is found down here in the corner on the lower left hand corner. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to zoom back in on my entity. Let's say that I forgot to do something. I forgot to draw a line from corner to corner, creating an X on the object. Rather than have to erase and do this all over again, I can go back to array. When selecting objects, I'll just select the 2 lines that I added, hit enter. All the other choices should remain the same, so I could preview it to make sure, and I'll accept it. Z enter, A enter to zoom all, and notice that the objects have now added the X to them. I'm going to make a copy of an object. I'll copy my lower left hand corner. I'll move it over here slightly, and I'll use that as my next array. And I'll use pan to pan over. And basically, I'll do array again. When selecting objects, I'll select my object, enter. And when picking points, I can pick points in the screen. So if I pick the lower left hand corner, I can just pick the next corner. Where would I want my object? So if I want it to be about that spacing, I can just select. Notice the row offset and column offsets appear up here, and they're very random because I was interactively picking and it wasn't very accurate. I wasn't using snap or anything. You could use snap, that would be more accurate. Otherwise, you can always adjust these items. You could go ahead and preview, and there would be your spacing. I'm just going to cancel this, and Z enter, A enter to zoom all. Now let's move this object that I just created down here in the corner. So I'll select it, hit enter, pick a base point, and I'm just going to slide it over. And with pan, I'm going to pan my screen over, slide this object way over to the right, and I'm going to use the array command. And in the array command, I'm going to select the object. Only thing this time, let's do 5 rows and 20 columns. And the row offset lets you leave it at 3 and 3. and angle of array, let's set to 45. I'm going to preview it. Notice that they're at 45 degrees would be the rows and columns that I'm setting. Now hit accept, D-enter, A-enter to zoom all, and you can see how you can make rows and columns that are set at a specific angle. In this case I had 45 degrees. So practice using the rectangular array command, try some things. Don't get too carried away because you can place, thousands of units by thousands of units and create tens of thousands of units, which could lock up your system. So be very careful when using the array command that you don't get too many items being copied. I know in the past we've had students, try some absurd numbers, and yep, they did lock up their systems. So be careful. But go ahead and doodle with us here. If you run into some problems or have questions, make sure to contact me. And this will wrap up the presentation for the array command with a rectangular option.